Now we're going to move on to preparing our sleeves. So at the bottom of your sleeve, you've got this slit. That's where you will put a placket in. And then you also have 4 notches down here, which you will match up to create 2 pleats. So I'm gonna do my pleats first. So I've got my first notch. I've got my first notch right here. I'm going to match it up with my second notch. And you want the opening of your fold to be going towards your slit here. So I've already put my placket on right here, but I will show you how to do the placket in the next step. But we're gonna put our pleats in first. So again, we're matching up our first notch and our second notch. Match those together. And then you want the opening of your fold pointing towards your slit. So I'm going to pin that first pleat into place. Now we're going to take our third notch and our fourth notch. You're going to match those up and do the same thing. Have the opening of your pleat, the opening in that fold pointing towards your placket, where your slit is in your sleeve. Pin that into place. I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm just going to run just a regular stitch across these folds so I can tack down these pleats. Sew it at about 3/8 of an inch away from this raw edge. Okay, your pleats are done. So now it's time to move on to your placket. So here's your sleeve. Pleats have been sewn into this piece. I've got my just raw edge, this slit right here. I have cut a bias strip. This bias strip is 1 1/4 inch wide and it's 9 inches long. And I've pressed it to where I've pressed the raw edges in. So here's it open. You're gonna press the 2 raw edges in towards the middle, and then you're gonna take this and press it again down the center. So it should look like this, all folded up. Now I'm going to show you a different way to attach your placket that's a little easier, I feel like, than the first time I showed y'all how to do a placket. You're welcome to still do it the other way. The other way is a 2-step sewing process. This is more of a 1-step sewing process. So I will take my camera over to the sewing machine so I can show you how to attach that. Okay, so for attaching your placket onto that slit in your sleeve, I have attached the presser foot that has the opening for the needle on the left side of the foot. I'm going to take my slit right here. I'm going to open it up to make it as straight of a line as I can. That will really only matter once you get closer to that corner. But I'm going to take my bias strip. It's folded. I'm going to put the edge of my fabric inside that fold to where it sandwiches around that raw edge. So the way I've pressed this, no raw edges are showing. And yeah, this edge is just sandwiched right in to that fold. So you can pin this into place or just hold it, whichever is easiest. I'm going to lift my presser foot. I'm going to put my presser foot down, and I have it lined up where the needle is going to go right on, right inside the edge of this fold. So it should be about a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of this fold. And again, that raw edge of this slit is just sandwiched in between this fold, and we're just gonna stitch it into place. So remember to back stitch, and I would just say go slowly, and you want to just make sure that you're not falling off the edge of your fold. And you also want to make sure, I would check as you go, make sure that this raw edge is as far into this fold, this bias strip, as you can get it. As you get closer to the ending of this slit where the angle changes, you're just going to have to be a little more diligent of making sure it stays within the fold. So just keep going. I'm going to keep on going towards that ending of the slit. Now, as you get closer to that point of your slit, you're going to take your other piece, your other leg here of the slit, and you're just going to try to pull this out to create as straight of a line as you can. And the biggest thing about going over this point is you want to try your best to not let your fabric fold up here. Okay, and then once you get over that point, it's smooth sailing from there. Remember, this is a bias strip, so it might stretch a little as you sew it, so you might have a little bit of a tail of your bias strip, but that's fine, we can cut that off. Okay, so I'm just gonna cut that little spot off. Okay, so here's my bias strip sewn. There's it on the inside. Just make sure that you didn't fall off. Actually, last step of this is you need to sew. You're gonna fold up your legs and you need to sew a diagonal stitch so that this placket folds correctly. So we're gonna put it back under our machine with the legs lined up, and you're just going to sew a little diagonal stitch. I'm back over at my sewing table, and there is the final product with that little diagonal line or diagonal stitch sewn. Now, you want your, I've already done it on this side, you want your bias strip that is closest to your pleats, you want it tucked in towards your pleats. So here's the one I just sewed. Here are my pleats. So where this bias strip is, we're gonna fold at this seam line. We're gonna just tuck that under and then we're going to stitch across to tack that into place, because you want on your sleeve, here's where my bias strip is showing, and this placket folds on top. So it shows on this side, but it's folded under and stitched down into place so that it folds on top of itself. So just go over to your machine, tuck this under, and then stitch it down at about 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now at this point, now that you've put in your placket and your pleats, you can cut your cuff out if you want your cuff to match the plaid print. I won't be counting off points if it doesn't match, but if you do want to match it, I would try to match this side right here that's on the other side of your pleats here. So just remember that this cuff will be on the wrist like this, and the edges will be lining up with the edges of your placket. And you'll see a notch right here at 1/4 inch, that 1/4 inch notch. You're going to line that up with the edge of your placket. And then if you want to try to match your print from there, you can. So mine does match, at least for right here. And then the rest of this part that's kind of extending past the sleeve, that's going to be coming around and sewing onto this edge of the sleeve. And so this edge right here will then match up with the edge of this placket. Before you can sew your cuff on though, that's just to give you an idea of how to match up your print if you want to. You just need to sew in your pleats and your placket first before you can figure out how your plaid will match from your sleeve onto your cuff. Okay, now we're going to move on to getting our sleeve ready to sew our cuff on. So before we can sew our cuff on, we need to sew our sides of our sleeve together. So just stack them on top of each other, right side of the fabric touching right side, line up those sides, and stitch this at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, I've sewn my underarm seam together at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I've also pressed that seam open. Now you can attach the cuff. Okay, I've got my cuff right here. The first thing I want to do is fold it in half lengthwise, and I'm going to sew it together at 1/4 inch seam allowance on each of these shorter edges. Okay, I've sewn that at 1/4 inch on each edge. I'm going to take my scissors and clip at my corners, kind of the same way you would do a collar, just to keep the bulk out of there. So I clipped those two bottom corners. Now I'm going to take my cuff, I'm going to fold it right side out. I'm going to poke my corners out so that they're nice and square. Now, from this point, you can sew this on like a waistband, where you would sew it on at 1/2 inch around the edge of your sleeve here. You could sew it at 1/2 inch and then fold it and then fold the other side in and stitch in the ditch. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail with that one because it would be the same as the waistband, and there's y'all have done that for your notebook, or you can do it the same way you kind of did for the bias strip that you put on your placket. I'm going to show you that way because I think that will be faster and just a new technique for you to learn. But if you want to do it the other way, that's more of a two-step process, you're welcome to do that as well. Just look up the waistband video. But for this one, now that I've turned it right side out, I'm going to fold under these raw edges, fold under at 1/2 inch, and press it down all the way around the cuff. Okay, I have pressed that. So it's got a 1/2 inch pressed under. Make sure that your edges up here, you've pressed under the same amount, that they're lining up and one's not taller than the other or shorter than the other one. And so now that you've done this and prepped your cuff, you can do the same technique that you did for your bias strip. We're gonna take this edge, we're gonna line up each edge of your placket with the edge of your cuff, and we're gonna sandwich your cuff inside. I'm also checking because if you're trying to match your plaid, there we go. If you're trying to match your plaid, make sure you're matching it up. You're going to sandwich this raw edge of your sleeve into this opening of your cuff, lining up the raw edge of this with the raw edge of your of what you folded inside for your cuff. So this will be sandwiched in at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna just put some pins in. Okay, so I've pinned this all the way around. So remember, on my side where my pleats are, my placket's tucked under. And so that edge of that fold will match the edge of the fold of this part of the cuff. This was the plaid that I was matching up. It starts to get a little off after that, but that's okay. And then this placket edge is the part that's showing, and that's matching up with the edge of the other side of the cuff. So again, this sleeve is sandwiched inside of this cuff at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm gonna put this under my sewing machine, and I'm gonna edge stitch at about 1/16 of an inch, and you're definitely wanting to catch the other side of this cuff. So do it at 1/16 of an inch, or even more of a skinny 1/8 of an inch, but we're gonna be stitching through this side of the cuff into our sleeve that's sandwiched and through this other side of the cuff. Okay, I've stitched my cuff on. So edge stitched by that fold. Here's the inside. Just make sure that you've picked up that other fold. And that is it for your cuff. So now you just have to put on your button and buttonhole. And then attach your sleeve to your top.